Greetings, this is Stephen of Brownstone Wellness, and today I want to discuss the similarities as well as differences of modern day yoga philosophies and ancient Egyptian yoga philosophies. So before we get into all that, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel so you get all the updates dealing with Kemetic yoga as well as holistic health and wellness. So, today we're looking at the similarities and the differences between modern day yoga philosophies and ancient Egyptian philosophies. The reason why I'm a practitioner of Kemetic yoga, which is an ancient Egyptian based yoga practice. So I wanted to break down the philosophies that we see in modern day yoga and the culture that it came from, as well as Kemetic yoga and the culture that it came from, which is ancient Egypt, better known as Kemet, which is the indigenous name of the country or the nation, that is. So let's look into first the modern day yoga philosophy. The word yoga is a Sanskrit word which means to yoke, to bind, or to connect. And the practice of yoga is not only dealing with the physical in terms of strengthening the body and lengthening the body through flexibility, but it also has to do with connecting to your mind, your emotions, and your spirit. So it's all about a full connection of mind, body, emotion, and your spirit. And the practice is connecting to the way you interact with individuals, the way you interact with your environment, dealing with nature, and just all around dealing with the world around you, and of course dealing with yourself. So yoga is far more than just being able to do very beautiful postures, which they call asanas, and it's more about being connected to a deeper part of yourself and your environment, which has somewhat of a connection to you. So the ancient Kemetic philosophy has the same approach. The Kemetic philosophy is about dealing with the forces of nature. The Neterus, or the ancient Egyptian gods, all represented the forces of nature, but not just Mother Nature, but human nature as well. So Kemetic philosophy was about connecting to your environment, and it was connecting to your humanity, connecting to self. So it's all about connection when it comes to comparing the two philosophies. So there's not much of a difference. Now, this is where we're going to start to see the differences between the yoga philosophy of today and the ancient Egyptian philosophy. Let's start with the modern day yoga philosophy. Modern day yoga philosophy has to do with, again, connecting to oneself. And it's more about postures or asanas. There are many ways to explain the depths of the yoga practice of today. One of the best ways to explain that philosophy is the 8 limbs of yoga. Each limb of yoga has to do with an aspect of human nature, and also has to do with doing postures, asana, as well as pranayama, which is breathing techniques, and meditation. So all 8 limbs make up what is today's yoga practice. And so there's a system, there's a structure to all this. Now let's look at the Kemetic philosophy that has some similarities to the 8 limbs, but is also slightly different. Ancient Egypt is very broad in terms of the philosophies and all the things that they talk about, not just dealing with the ancient Egyptian gods, but also the approach to how you live your life. And one of the best ways to look at how the ancient Egyptians value and created a system or a structure on how you live your life is dealing with the laws of Ma'at. Ma'at is the ancient Egyptian goddess who is based on just the aspect of living life in balance. Ma'at also has to do with 7 principles. And these 7 principles are truth, justice, order, harmony, righteousness, reciprocity, and balance. In dealing with the 8 limbs of yoga, let's look at the 3 limbs of yoga, which is asana, meditation, and pranayama, and find the similarities as well as differences that we see in the ancient Egyptian philosophy and Kemetic yoga practice. So, let's look at asana. The asanas that we typically see in modern day yoga practice, some are actually mimicking the movements of animals. So again, this all goes back to humans connecting with their environment and with nature. But also the movements that we see in modern day yoga has been created, or it was developed because of the physical benefit of the body, being able to strengthen it as well as lengthen it and building up flexibility in the physical body. And this all was connected to just being more connected to oneself. So now if we look at some movement that we see in ancient Egypt, one, there were no terminology that described the movements in ancient Egypt from my understanding. But the movements that we see in ancient Egypt are very similar to some of the asanas that we see in modern day yoga practice. For example, the plow pose. The plow pose where one leg is over the head while you're laying flat on the back. We see the same posture done by the ancient Egyptian god of the earth who goes by the name of Geb. So you're seeing already some similarities, and I'm pretty sure this was something in ancient Egypt that folks were doing in terms of their physical movement. There was a reason why the leg was over the head in the hieroglyph of Geb. The depiction that we see in hieroglyphs that we see in modern day yoga practice today is the half wheel pose. The wheel pose or half wheel pose is also seen in a papyrus artwork in the coronation of a queen who is receiving their crown. And there is a scene on the papyrus where there are these musicians as well as dancers who are celebrating the coronation. And one of the scenes within the papyrus is a dancer doing a back bend that is very similar to a half wheel. So you already see the gymnastic aspect of it, the similarities. And then there are also postures and body movements within ancient Egypt that you don't see in modern day yoga practice. For example, here you will see the god, the ancient Egyptian god, by the name of He. He means infinity. And He is in a posture where, as you can see, there's a deep knee bend and a spinal rotation. And this is symbolic of the whole aspect that everything is infinite, from time to your spirit to energy. All is infinite, and that never dies. It's immortal. So in today's Kemetic yoga practice, we call this the pose of immortality. Another posture that we see in ancient Egypt that has a direct correlations to ancient Egypt and is not seen in a modern day yoga practice is the pose of Min. Min is an ancient Egyptian god that is the representation of fertility. male fertility, but fertility overall. Now let's look at the next limb. We look at the practice of pranayama. Pranayama is dealing with the breath. And pranayama, there are various breathing techniques that you can do to help with healing thyself. In ancient Egypt, there was no necessarily breathing technique that one will do to help with healing thyself, but the power of the breath was acknowledged. The importance of breathing was acknowledged, and it was very important. One particular Neteru that we can look at is Shu. Shu is the god of air, but he's also the god of the breath of life. Because in the creation story in ancient Egypt, when the world was created, when Ra created the world, the first thing he did was breathe life into this planet, into this space. And it came in the form of Shu, air, the wind. And another way that the ancient Egyptians show that the breath was sacred was the Ankh symbol. The Ankh symbol, which is one of the most oldest and probably the most sacred symbol in ancient Egyptian civilization, the symbol of life, it was typically seen given to a particular person through the nostril or through the mouth, which shows you that this was the breath of life. That a deity was breathing life into this person, breathing this divine energy into them. And that all has to do with the aspect of pranayama. And now the last limb that we're going to look at on the 8 limbs of yoga that we will see in the ancient Egyptian civilization or philosophy is meditation. Meditation in modern day yoga practice is simply sitting in a place of comfort and being still, and your eyes are closed and you're focusing on your breathing, but also you're doing a lot with the mind in terms of releasing any energy, bringing your mind, bringing your body, your spirit into a place of peace, and finding that balance and finding this harmony with oneself. In ancient Egypt, they had a similar practice or approach to things, and this was called Resut Kwed. The symbol of Resut Kwed was an eye over a person laying on a bed, a mummified individual who was laying on a bed. And the term Resut Kwed means to be aware while in a dream state. So the ancient Egyptians believed that your dreams was a way of you connecting to oneself, connecting to a higher self, connecting to a divine energy. And that's very similar to what we know about with meditation practice today. So looking at these limbs, these 3 different limbs of asana, pranayama, and meditation, and looking at the ancient Egyptian perspective of those 3 limbs, we see that human beings had a great way of connecting to movement, to connecting to the breath, and to connecting to a deeper state of self.